Successful people in every discipline of life read and implement books. And they do that because when I was growing up, I was not much of a reader. Poor and middle class people learn poor and middle class money habits because they learn about money at home. In one of the early days, I saw this TED Talk and the speaker said from stage, I say in the book, if you replace 15 minutes of social media scrolling in the morning and just the first or last 15 minutes of your Netflix in the evening, that's 30 minutes a day. And for somebody who's just starting out, that then they develop passion as a result of consistency.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Compounding Project podcast, where we talk about taking small steps to become healthy, wealthy, and wise. I'm your host Satish Kachula. This episode is all about wisdom. Our guest today is Nick, who is joining us from Boston.
I just started to think about my human potential. How can I live a great life?
He has more than 190,000 followers on Instagram, where he shares about book recommendations, reading tips, and many more. With that, Nick, welcome to the show.
Satish, I'm excited to be here. Can I ask you the first question today?
Wow, sure. Sounds good, yes.
I know you're a book lover, obviously. So what is the best book that you've read in 2024?
Yes, I've just finished reading a book called $1 Million Weekend by Noah Kagan. It's amazing. It's one of the reasons why I actually started this podcast as well, because he said, don't think about 100 steps, just think about step one. And you just focus on step one, and then you will figure out how to go from 1 to 2. So that's my best book so far that I've read in 2024.
Oh, that's awesome. I actually posted a photo with Noah Kagan on LinkedIn today because he came by my house actually in Boston towards the end of last year, maybe early this year. I don't really remember when it was, but he stopped by and we recorded an episode for my podcast all about the $1 Million Weekend. And what a great book. What a great human being. It's just so funny that you mentioned that book because I literally edited and posted that today on LinkedIn. So such a small world.
Oh my God, that's such a coincidence because I've been following Noah Kagan for almost a year now. He has his app Sumo where he built his business, and also his book is such an amazing book. I will link that in the show notes. Wow, yeah. Look at that. Noah Kagan. Wow. Just so for people to understand, Noah Kagan is one of the very few employees at Facebook.
Yeah, I think he was employee number 30.
Number 30 at Facebook, and then he did a bunch of stuff after that. Please do check out his book, $1 Million Weekend, if you haven't read it. It's an amazing book. Nick, I know you're a busy man, so while doing some research for this episode, I figured you do a lot of stuff. So you have an Instagram page with 180,000 plus followers, and you have written a book, Rise of the Reader, which we're going to talk about soon today. You have a podcast where you interview authors, and you have a book marketing agency, and you're a public speaker. And more than all of this, you're becoming a father. First of all, thanks for taking the time. So my first question to you is for people who might not know who you are, can you give a background about yourself just so people are aware of you?
Yeah, sure. So here's kind of my background story. What usually surprises people is that when I was growing up, I was not much of a reader. So I was more of the athlete stereotype, not really much of the academic. I mean, you would not find me with a book in my hands, and you probably couldn't even pay me to read a book when I was in my teens and early 20s. But all of that changed for me when I took an internship going into my senior year of college at a local software company up in New Hampshire, just north of where the two of us are recording today. And my boss at that internship introduced me to podcasts. And so I was commuting about an hour each way, 5 days a week. I was spending 10 hours a week in the car. And he said, listen, Nick, will listening to the same song for the 500th time change your life? Probably not, but the right podcast might. And so I started listening to all these shows just like this, where a host would interview a series of guests and the guest would share with the audience what they've done to become successful. And because I was listening to so many episodes, I noticed some patterns. And one very clear pattern was that successful people in every discipline of life read and implement books. And they do that because books condense decades of somebody else's greatest life lessons into days of reading. And they're available for $20 and you can read and implement them in a few hours of your time. That's a hard ratio to beat. And so I started to read books, and sort of the rest is history. From there, I started BookThinkers, and it started as a little baby side hustle Instagram page where I would share my favorite books. And as it continued to grow, I started to work with authors, helping them promote and market their books. And And over time, I realized that I had access to so many of my favorite authors and I had follow-up questions about their books. So I started recording interviews with them and posting those all over the internet. And now my agency, I've got 10 people on my team and we support hundreds of authors a year. And like you mentioned, I've got my first baby on the way. So my wife, Rachel, we got married last year. She's pregnant. She's due in October with our first baby. So we can't wait. Maybe there'll be a BookThinkers Kids or something. You never know. Where I share kids books. And so that's a little bit about me. And I'll share one other thing, which is that if I didn't work in the book space, I would work in the travel space. I love international travel as a form of personal development, and it's my favorite thing to do. So my wife and I have visited over 25 different countries in the last 5 or 6 years together, and I just love traveling.
Wow. There's so much to unpack right there. So first of all, congratulations on your baby. I've had a baby recently as well. I have a 15-month-old. So
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's going to be a roller coaster ride, but yeah, I'm sure you'll be enjoying the process. So I think we have a similar story when it comes to how I started my reading journey as well. So I was commuting to work. I had almost 1.5 hours every day. And then I was so tired of so bored of listening to the same songs. So I thought, okay, I'll just listen to podcasts at the time. And then I stumbled across a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi, and that changed everything. So you mentioned the same. So what was one book that actually started your reading journey? Any book that stands out?
Yeah, the very first book that I decided to read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And that's a favorite for a lot of people for a number of reasons. Number one, it's a short book. It's less than 200 pages and it has pretty big font. Number two, it touches on a subject that all of us can relate to, which is personal finance and money and investing. So right in the beginning of that book, the author says, poor and middle class people learn poor and middle class money habits because they learn about money at home from their parents. And the subject of money is not really taught in school. And so only the rich kids get access to the rich money habits, unless you read books written by rich people. And so that's what hooked me. I was in. I decided I would start reading all sorts of books in that subject. So I read books like The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. I read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clason. And from there, I started to branch into some other personal development style material like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Covey, The War of Art. No, it was The Art of War by Sun Tzu. The War of Art is by Stephen Pressfield. I fell head over heels in love with what books can do for you because at the time I was a junior going into my senior year of college, always shying away from conversations about money. But I went back my senior year having read a bunch of books on money and I was leading those discussions. And I just thought, what other areas of my life can I go from insecure and ignorant to like confidently leading those conversations and passionate? And that's why I just branched out from there. And a quick note on I Will Teach You to Be Rich, which is an amazing book. I love the concept in that book that you should cut ruthlessly on the expenses that don't really matter to you in life, but you should spend vigorously on the things that do bring you a lot of joy. And so that's an example of like, for me, I don't eat out very much when I'm at home because I don't care about going to the same restaurant for the 50th time. Like it doesn't bring me a lot of joy. But when I'm traveling internationally with my wife, we'll spend tons of money eating out at different restaurants, trying different cuisines all over the place. It's a lesson that I adopted from Ramit's book, and I really do love that one.
Good. Yeah, that book, like I said, is one of my first books that I read. And I still remember the quote that he had mentioned. So spend extravagantly on things you like and cut costs mercilessly on things you don't. So it hit me hard. So that's when I started realizing, especially for me, I don't care about what car I drive. I'm still driving a 6-year-old Toyota Camry and I'm still okay with it. But I would love to splurge on health, books and investing. That's where I focus most of my time and energy. So I don't care about like what car I drive, or I don't care about, just like you said, I don't care about eating out too much. So I am cutting costs on those so that I can spend more time and money on the things that I like. I'm glad, you like that concept as well. So I really like the books that you had mentioned, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Richest Man in Babylon. And I even like Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. That's also something that I like as well. I haven't read The War of Art, The Art of War though. I just wanted to go back. So you said you started reading books and then reading multiple books and it's just a domino effect. So how has reading at that point improved your life? How many areas did it impact? How can people also learn from that?
Well, when I first started reading, I was focused mainly on personal finance and understanding the language of money and improving my own financial literacy. And so that's where I started. And from there, I've read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books on health and fitness, on personal finance and investing, on philosophy, human psychology, entrepreneurship, all types of areas in business, scaling business, sales, marketing, communication, business finance, and tons of other areas. I've read a lot of iconic entrepreneurship biographies. So it's improved my life in every way imaginable. I mean, I am a totally different human being today than I was 10 years ago. Because in one of the early days, I saw this TED Talk, and the speaker said from stage, he said to the audience, how much would you pay to come over to my house next weekend for a private mastermind? And in that mastermind, Arnold Schwarzenegger will teach you about weightlifting. Steve Jobs will teach you about innovation. Benjamin Franklin will teach you about money. Gandhi will teach you about peace. Mother Teresa will teach you about service to others. And he goes down this whole list, and people are throwing out crazy numbers. And he says, well, obviously I don't have a mastermind next weekend with these people. Half of them aren't even alive anymore, but I do have their books or books written about them. And they teach all of the same lessons. And you can get access to those books for a heck of a lot less money than all the dollar values you were throwing out. And you don't even have to travel. You can do it from your own home. And for me, that's when I just started to think about my human potential. How can I live a great life? Well, it starts by reading about other people who have lived great lives and then implementing what sometimes took them decades to learn. You can skip the line and implement it tomorrow. And that's why I feel today like I just love my time. I love my life. I love everything about it. I'm healthy, I'm wealthy, I'm happy. I have great relationships. I'm spiritually connected, and it's all because of the books that I've read. I know that was a little off topic, but I really care about these things because I believe that there is a book to solve every single problem that we deal with as human beings.
Wow, that's very well said, because that reminds me of a quote. I believe it's Charlie Munger or Warren Buffett. He said, books, 10 years of experience can be condensed in a book, right? That you can buy for $10 and then you can read within 10 hours. So that's how powerful books are. And then even Charlie Munger keeps saying, when he passed away recently, but he said he's an avid reader, and he said, I talk to dead people because, he keeps reading to books written by these ancient authors. And then he keeps saying that, he'll have a conversation just by going through books. He says, as long as you have a book in your hand, he doesn't feel like he's wasting time. So yeah, there is so many good lessons that we can learn from books, and also we can implement in our life. So I even tell my friends the importance of books. But the major challenge or the major question that I get from them is like, how do I find time to read? So let's say if somebody comes to you and asks, hey, Nick, it's all good. I know the importance of reading books. I know they're important. I know that they can change my life, but how do you find time to read? How can I find time to read? What are the tips that you would tell that person?
Yeah, I love by starting with a question. I would say, let's say it was you asking me. I would say, Satish, if I was to pay you $10,000 to read a book by the end of the month, do you think you could do it? And you'd be like, yeah, of course. And then so you've fallen into my trap, because now we've established that it's not whether or not you can read, it's whether or not you're choosing to prioritize it over the other things that are in your calendar. Because if I was to pay you money, you could do it. You would move things around, you would find the time, but without the money, you lose that incentive. So now let's talk a little bit about how to fit it into your calendar. Instead of trying to find time to read, I recommend replacing low impact activities like scrolling on social media or a little bit of Netflix with reading and implementing personal development books. And it can happen very quickly. I say in the book, if you replace 15 minutes of social media scrolling in the morning and just the first or last 15 minutes of your Netflix in the evening, that's 30 minutes a day. And for somebody who's just starting out, 30 minutes of reading is probably equivalent to 20 pages. And if you can do that Monday through Friday, just replace a little bit of scrolling and a little bit of Netflix or HBO or sports or whatever you watch in the evening with reading a good book. You can read 100 pages a week. And most of these books, as you and I know, they're 200 pages these days. So that's 2 books every month. 2 major areas of life that you can improve every month by replacing a little bit of social media and a little bit of TV or Netflix or whatever you watch. And The other thing that I like to say is that just like with the music that we talked about in the beginning, the scrolling on social media and the binge watching of TV is not going to change your life. It might help you escape from your day to day. It might relax you, but it's not going to improve your life. And when you think about serving your future self, I want to serve Nick 5 years from now, 10 years from now. What's he going to be happier about? Scrolling on social media, watching Netflix, or reading and implementing a book that will then compound for the rest of my life?
Yes.
Right? So that's the conversation that I have with people. And if they're not freaked out by how much I love reading, they'll normally go, wow, that makes sense. You're right. I should read a little bit. And I do have the time. I'm just making excuses. Pull out your screen time and look at how much time you spend on social media. I mean, it's bananas these days.
True. I mean, I read this stat somewhere that average American spends 4 to 5 hours on social media and TV combined. And you can imagine, like, and just like you said, 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening. That's like 30 minutes. If you think about like 24 hours per day, it's less, like, it's close to one person. So it's not too much of your time. We all have time. It's just about like how we prioritize it, right? So let's say, so I just want these tips to be more actionable, right? So I'll put myself in the shoes maybe 7 years ago. So I know the importance of reading. Now I figured out I have time, right? So where do I start? So let's say I'll pick an area. Let's say I want to read, I want to improve my financial situation. So I have time, I know what to read, and then I start reading. And the major challenge that even I faced, or at least I get DMs from on my Instagram page, that the major challenge that I face is I get bored after reading 10 pages. I just can't focus. So what should I do? What would you recommend them do?
Okay, I will make this as actionable as possible, but I do want to start with just, a little bit of philosophy or maybe human psychology on the front side.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of us have this idea that we should enjoy personal development, that we're supposed to be fully engaged and love every second of it. But some of the most successful people on the planet, they didn't start with a pre-existing passion or purpose. They did the hard work. They fell in love with the grind. They did what was necessary, and through the consistency of reading 10 pages a day, for instance, over time, you will then develop the passion for it. So we think passion has to come before consistency. I would argue that for a lot of successful people, they found a way to be consistent through willpower and, delayed gratification and thinking about serving their future self. They were to push through long enough that then they develop passion as a result of consistency. That's what happened for me. So we need to fall in love with doing the hard work up front, and a lot of times we'll fall in love with it over time. But let me give you something a little bit more actionable. I think a way to stay emotionally connected and excited to reading a book is all about choosing the right book and really defining the problem that you're going to solve. So if you have a problem that you're dealing with every single day, like financial scarcity, because you don't have a good hold on your personal finances, over the next 30 years, you're going to deal with that 11,000 times if it happens once a day, 22,000 times if you think about money twice a day, or 100,000 times if you think about it 10 times a day, which most of us do. So you could consistently feel the pain and always be anxious about your financial situation, or you could solve the problem. And you could solve the problem by researching a great book about somebody else who already solved it for you, and then you just need to read and implement the book. When you exaggerate the problem like that, and you really expand it out, you think about it from a third-party perspective, do I really want to experience this pain every day 11,000 more times over the next 30 years? No, of course I don't. So let's start with the problem. I want to remove my financial anxiety. Let's find a great book that deals with solving that problem. If you stay focused on the problem, you will have more of an emotional connection to sticking with the book and not being bored. Because when I'm reading and I'm really connected to the problem I'm trying to solve, every page is like, is this going to be it? Is this going to be the solution to my problem? It's like I'm searching for gold. I'm always 3 feet from gold. It's like, what's going to be on the next page? It's exciting for me. Most people, they don't read with that level of emotion or intention. They have intention deficit disorder. They only read the book because they saw it on Instagram or because a mentor recommended it to them. No wonder they're getting bored. It's not exciting. There's no emotional connection. So to make this a little bit more actionable, I actually recommend that people set a SMART goal for every book that they read. And it only takes 5 minutes. SMART is a goal-setting acronym that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, written and relevant, and time bound. So let's go through it real quick for I Will Teach You to Be Rich. Let's say that was the book that you decided to pick up. I'd set a specific goal so that I know exactly what I'm searching for. I'm looking to find and implement at least one new personal finance strategy that I'm excited about so that I can lower my financial anxiety on a day-to-day basis and improve my life by, we'll just say, August 1st. So that is specific. I know exactly what I'm searching for. It's measurable. At the end of the experience, did I implement at least one thing to lower my financial anxiety? Is that attainable? Yes. I didn't say like make $1 million this year. I just said,
Yes.
find and implement one thing. Is it relevant? Am I emotionally connected to it? Heck yes, I am. I just did that experiment, or I just did that exercise where I blew it out over the next 30 years and I realized I don't want to feel that 11,000 more times. And then time bound. Give yourself a deadline to take action. It will create a little bit of urgency. We're all familiar with Parkinson's law, which states that a task will expand to the amount of time that we give it. So if you don't give yourself a deadline to take action on the book that you're reading, it'll just float off and you'll probably forget to read the book and you'll never think about it again. Last thing I'll mention there is that I write my intention, my SMART goal, on the inside cover of each book that I read, and I reread it every time I go through another chapter so that I'm constantly reminding myself of the problem I'm trying to solve and the items that I'm looking to implement so that they reveal themselves with clarity as I'm going through the book. I think that's how we can add a little bit more excitement and be less bored while we read. Sorry, that was a super long explanation, but I hope it was helpful.
No, that's very good. I mean, I hope people take action out of it. That's such an important tip, SMART goal, because everybody. So it's ironic that if you ask anybody, like if you ask even parents as well, what are the top two problems that they're thinking about? The number one would be health. Number two would be money. So it's almost everybody on the planet. These two would be the major things that they always worry about. But if you ask them, like, have you read a single book on how to be more healthy or how to make more money or how to manage finances? I mean, 99% of the people would say no, right? Because we have the statistics. So we know that they're important, but we don't take action. So that is why I feel what you said just resonates with me a lot. And I hope people really take action out of this. So I can come up with one challenge that I actually face, but after it or listen to Naval Ravikant, his tip helped me a lot. So the problem that I faced was there are some books that actually are complex to read. Like they're dense books, and sometimes I don't enjoy reading. And Tim Ferriss says this, like, write book at the right time. That will have a big impact. So let's say if somebody reads a book, it's a dense book, and then they know they have to read it, but they don't enjoy it. We're all born and brought up from a childhood that, if I start something, I have to finish. Like if I start a book, I have to finish that book, like cover to cover. But Naval Ravikant, he said, read what you love until you love to read. And he also mentioned that he reads books as blog posts, right? In blog posts, you don't just go through the whole blog, right? From first post to the next post, you just skim around and then switch between books. But do you recommend, let's say if it's a dense book that people, they really want to do something, but they can't proceed, do you recommend switching to a different book or just go through the process of going from the beginning to the end? What would you say?
I don't think there's a right answer, but I'd recommend exploring a few things. Number one, when I want to read a very dense book that's difficult to understand and it's just overbearing in terms of its length, it just feels like it's too big of a task, I'll choose to listen to that book instead. I find that oftentimes I can work through long, complex books on audio much more efficiently than I can with physical paper books. Now, I am a much bigger fan of physical paper books than I am audiobooks for a number of reasons. But I think audiobooks are a good way to get through those. Number two, life is too short to read bad books. I was listening to a podcast interview one time between Tim Ferriss and Ryan Holiday, and Ryan said to Tim, the rule of 100. So take the number 100 and subtract your age. For instance, I'm 30, so we'll take the number 70. I have to read at least 70 pages of the book before I can determine whether or not it's a good fit for me. And the logic is that the older you get, the wiser you will have become. Therefore, you don't have to read as much. So if I was 50, I'd only have to read 50 pages. etc. I think that's a good rule to live by. Give a book a good, decent shot, but if it's too complex, if you don't enjoy it, then put it to the side and move on. You could replace it with an audiobook. You could replace it with a much simpler beginner level book in the same genre, maybe a different book by the same author. So there are a lot of options there. You bring up one other point that I want to mention, which is that there are a lot of ways to improve your reading process, but if you don't enjoy them, you won't stick with it over the long term. And I think enjoying the reading process is really important. So sometimes people ask me about speed reading. I can read pretty fast, but I don't like to implement all of the speed reading techniques because then it takes the joy out of the reading process for me. Yeah, I could get through more books per year, but I'm past that. I'm reading for implementation. I'm slow and steady. I'm looking to implement and reflect on the material, not just get to the next book for the sake of checking it off. So if you don't enjoy reading long, complex books, don't read them. That would be my take.
I think every reader goes through the same journey, I believe, because I was in the same boat as well. I was just focusing on the number of books that I read. I have Goodreads account, and then beginning of every year I say, hey, I'm being ambitious, like I'll start like 2 books per month, that 24 books a year. And then I would just want, sometimes there were days when I didn't enjoy a book, but I was focused on finishing it because I had a goal. So it was just a vanity metric. But later on, I realized nobody cares about how many books I read. So it's just that I need to know, I need to get better. And that's all I care about if I don't enjoy a book. And your tip helps a lot because there are some books, maybe the beginning, you might not resonate with it, but give it some time because it's not a short book, right? The author has spent so much of time going through the experience and also condensing that into a book. So give it some time. If you really don't like it, then don't do it. That reminds me of a quote by James Clear. He says, what gets rewarded gets repeated and what gets punished gets avoided. So if you don't enjoy the process, you might not repeat it. So read what you love until you love to read. So that's great advice. So I want to zoom in on your reading process. I mean, I'm being selfish, I learn myself. So what does your reading process look like? You mentioned physical books. So do you do a Pomodoro technique where you read for 15 minutes, 30 minutes straight, time blocking? And how do you take notes and how do you also retain what you read? Let's start with your reading process. How does it look like?
It continues to change and evolve over time. So for a while, I did use the Pomodoro technique. Right now, here's what it looks like. I wake up, I go for a long walk with my dog outside. I get some early morning fresh air, some sunlight before I consume caffeine. I then go to the gym and I work out. I get the blood flowing, the exercise endorphins kicking. And I come home, I'll make coffee, and then I'll sit down and do some reading. So that's when I have my peak energy, peak focus is like mid-morning, after the exercising, after the sunlight, after being really present, doing some meditations, I'm ready to read. Some days that's 30 minutes, some days it's more, some days unfortunately it's less. I also love to read in longer blocks on weekend days when I don't have as much going on. I start by defining a problem. Then I pick a good book that can help me solve that problem or build that skill or satisfy that curiosity. I set a SMART goal for every book that I read. So I define exactly what I'm looking to get out of it. And then I'll just read for those chunks of time that I already mentioned. I try to have good lighting, good posture. I do take notes and highlight. But more recently, I've been trying not to read and implement at the same time. I've been trying to read the entire book, collect all of the potential actions that I could take to solve my problem, choose the ones that will have the most impact and are easiest to implement, and then I'll implement them after I'm done reading the entire book. I realized over time that sometimes I would get caught up in implementing something on page 30, and on page 31, there was a technique to solve the same problem that was twice as efficient, that would take half his time and cost half the money, right? So now I try to read a full book before I implement it. And at a very high level, that's what I do. I do highlight, I do take notes in the book, but I really try to get through the book one full time before I go back and do the deeper dive and reflection.
Oh, that's a very good advice. So do you have is it a Google sheet that you use, or how do you keep track of actions? Because for me personally, after read a book and then 1 month later, I would forget most of the information. It's hard for me to read. I personally have a Google Sheet, and also I use Evernote as well. So I transfer my actions or the learning from the book into an Evernote, and I keep reminders if I really find a good book, and that's how I do it. But like, so what is your process? How do you keep track of the actions for implementation?
Yeah, we are very similar. I use Evernote to house my favorite takeaways from each book. And then I also have an activity tracker that I built using Google Sheets. I update it every single week with the activities that I'm looking to implement, how many times I'm looking to implement the activity. And then every day it's up as a tab on my web browser. So as I'm going through kind of my morning routine, I'm checking the boxes, and then other priorities or things that I just read and I just inserted into my activity tracker are kind of in a different section, things that I'm just looking to try out or experiment with. So yeah, we're very similar, Evernote and Google Sheets.
That's very good. It might be overwhelming as somebody who actually doesn't read, or for somebody who's just starting to read. It might be overwhelming, but I really want people to understand that it's an evolving process. So we were not like this when we had first started our reading journey. So please don't get overwhelmed. Try to take action, and then everybody's reading process is unique. So please do take action. So I know we are running short of time, so I just want to talk about your book, The Rise of the Reader. I have got this copy a few months back, and I read this on a plane on my work trip, and I finished it in less than a week. It was so good. So can you talk us about this book? So what motivated you to write this book?
Sure. And I appreciate you buying and reading it. So over the years of building my community, although I have a marketing agency that serves authors, I have a very large community of nonfiction book lovers. And I've received thousands of questions over the years related to my reading process and related to how to retain and implement more from each book that we read. And I was answering people one-on-one. I was responding to emails and DMs, and I just felt that A, that was not very efficient. I was having to retype information every time. B, I was underserving the people that I was trying to serve the most, because I was only giving them a fraction of what was in my head and a fraction of my process because of time constraints and volume of requests. So I was like, if I wrote a book that detailed my entire process A to Z, I bet that would be useful for my community. And so that was the inspiration. I saw a very clear demand for the information. If there was another place to send people, if there was another book that dealt with the same exact solution, I would have just sent people to that. I wouldn't have written the book myself, but I couldn't find one. And I had developed a lot of unique strategies and processes over time and thoughts on reading and implementing books. So that's why I decided to write it.
I'm glad you wrote it, because this book is so actionable that, if you look at the back page, I did a lot of actions for me to keep track. I've loved reading the book. There's one chapter that I loved reading the most. It's chapter 6, the compound effect. So you can understand. My Instagram handle is Compounding Project, and you might know how much I love compounding. So can you talk about chapter 6, compound effect? What is it, and why people should care about it?
Yeah, of course. One of my favorite books of all time is called The Compound Effect, and it's by Darren Hardy.
Yeah.
And he states sort of what you stated in your intro, which is that small steps in the right direction, repeated over a very long period of time, will lead to disproportionately positive outcomes. That exponential hockey stick curve that we're all looking for in our businesses, in our health, in our relationships, in our personal finances, in our investing, whatever it is, we all want a little bit of effort to go a long way. And so in that book, there are plenty of examples of the compound effect taking action. And I just thought to myself, what other areas in my life can I truly implement this type of delayed gratification, this type of behavior where I'm doing something small and manageable every single day, but over time it will lead to this beautiful place? A good example would be my social media following. So every single day, we produce a piece of nonfiction or personal development book-related content. It's the same amount of effort for me to produce a piece of content today as it was when I started my community 6 or 7 years ago. But instead of reaching 5 or 10 people every time we post, now we're reaching tens of thousands of people every time we post, because I took a small step, which is posting every single day for years and years and years, just trying to provide value, collect feedback, make small changes, but continue moving forward. And that same effort today reaches thousands of times more people than it did when I first started. that's an example of the compound effect. Or if you were to dollar cost average invest $25 into your investment account every week, it's that same $25 going in, but now it's compounding at such a high rate 10 years later. And I just love thinking about the compound effect in terms of health or in terms of social media or in terms of anything, really. I think it could apply to almost every area of our life. So I'm just such a big fan. And I think it was Einstein, right, that said it was the eighth wonder of the world. So I love the name of your podcast.
Oh, sure. Thank you. I mean, that's one of my favorite quotes of all time. Einstein said this, compounding is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it, earns it. He who doesn't, pays it. And that is something that I keep coming back to that quote. I'm still getting chills, hearing that quote, because that's so true. Because for me, like before reading, I was in the mindset that massive success requires massive effort. That is what I was thinking until I read this book, Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. It shows, you can achieve massive results by just taking small, consistent actions. So we all underestimate. Bill Gates said this. We overestimate what we can do in 1 year, and then we underestimate what we can do in 10 years. So it's such a powerful quote, and people should not underestimate the power of daily habits. So I really love daily habits. And then compounding is not something new, just so for people to understand. We all heard about compound interest growing up. We did those calculations, like simple interest and compound interest, but very few people know it can be applied to real life. And the books that I read, almost every finance book or investing book that I read talks about compounding. So compounding can not only be applied to money, but just like you said, it can be applied to health, it can be applied to social media, it can be applied to relationships, it can be applied to knowledge. There's like so much. That's why for me, like I'm just all excited about compounding. So I know we're talking about daily habits, so I want to zoom in on your daily habits. What are your daily habits? Pick a few areas that are so small if you look on a daily basis, but if you zoom out, they're actually powerful. So what are your daily habits?
I think my habits around sleep are probably the most important. So I am obsessed with getting a good night of sleep every single night of the week. And there are little things that I do, but they contribute to great rest, which is really great for all areas of health and longevity. But also having a good night of sleep is really important for my energy throughout the workday, which leads to more money in my bank account. It's important for my emotional intelligence, which leads to better relationships. It's these little actions that I do that end up impacting every single area of my life. And think about the compounded return of my energy in relationships and work over 20 or 30 years. Just little tiny sleep habits are so important. So to give a couple of examples, I have some sleep apnea, which means that I snore, and snoring is very disruptive to your sleep. So I wear mouth tape over my mouth when I sleep. That helps me improve my sleep quality. I have blackout curtains in my bedroom so that no light can get into my room, which really improves the quality of my sleep. I wear an eye mask for the same reason. I also have a noise machine. My noise machine keeps the noise in my environment consistent, which means that the likelihood that a little noise outside or a bird chirping wakes me up is a lot lower, which again improves my sleep quality. I have a cooling mattress pad. I used to use a chilly pad. Now I use an 8 sleep mattress pad, and it actually keeps my mattress really cold, 55 degrees Fahrenheit. And that cooling mattress improves my sleep quality like crazy. And it's a one-time purchase that then compounds for the rest of my life. So there's all these little things that I do that I pay attention to. No caffeine in the afternoon, no food after dinner, trying to limit blue light, wearing blue light blockers, all the things I already mentioned, sleep supplements. There are all these tiny little things that improve my day-to-day life. So that's a good example, I think.
Oh yeah, that's powerful. I've always underestimated how powerful sleep is until I read a book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. That's when I realized, because we all heard this quote, right? You can sleep when you're dead. So we totally underestimate the power of sleep. But I like your advice. I've got a few action items myself that I can implement in my own life when it comes to sleep. So I know we are getting towards the end of the podcast. I really want to talk about your Instagram page before I ask a few questions that I ask almost every guest, but can you talk about your Instagram page, BookThinkers? What was the motivation behind starting it, and how do you stay consistent with your content?
Yeah, the motivation around starting it, there were a few different motivations. Originally, I wanted to build a mobile application that could help readers retain and implement more from the books they're reading. So the original inspiration for Book Thinkers was to build an audience of nonfiction book lovers so that when my app launched, I could sell it into my audience. Now, long story short, the app never came to fruition. We hired a company, they went out of business, spent a lot of money and time on this thing, and it didn't work out. But as my audience continued to grow, I had authors knocking on my door saying, "Hey, Nick, I think my book could be a good fit for your audience. Can I pay you to talk about it?" And that's when the second iteration of this business was born. Book Thinkers today is a place where I post about a new nonfiction book almost every day. Sometimes we post about the same book 3, 4, 5 times, but you'll get a new piece of content every day. And it's all focused on personal development and self-help type information. There's also a lot of business in there and health and fitness. And I truly love the community. You know, we do anywhere between 500,000 to 1 million organic impressions a month with the content on Instagram. And it's just led me to so many cool conversations. You know, I've had the chance to work with a lot of the people we've talked about today, a lot of my favorite authors. I have your Instagram up right now and I see you follow a ton of them. But it's just such a beautiful place to connect with people and to provide value.
That was one of my motivations for starting my own Instagram page as well. And you are one of the inspirations. I believe I reached out to you a couple of years ago about this podcast, and thanks for putting out such a great content, and thanks for the inspiration. It motivated me to start my own page. For people to know more about Nick, his Instagram handle is BookThinkers. Please do check out his page. He has almost like 190,000 plus followers on Instagram. So he creates content daily. So please do check out his page. We are getting towards the end of the podcast. So there are the 3 questions that I ask all my guests to get some inspiration and also urge people to take action. So the first question is, so we discussed about a lot of stuff today. There are so many actions, and you know, compounding project is all about taking action. So we have to take that first step for the compounding to start its effect. And my compounding project is all about health, wealth, and wisdom. And books are an integral part of this compounding project. If somebody would ask, like, the 3 books in 3 areas of life. So 1 book for health, 1 book for wealth, and 1 book on wisdom or self-help. What would you recommend?
The book that I would recommend for health would have been Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, but since you already touched on it, I'll give a different recommendation. I recommend Life Force by Tony Robbins and Peter Diamandis. It's a big book. It touches on a lot of different subjects related to health, but I think it will introduce you to so many concepts like biology as information technology that you can use to then go improve almost every area of your health. For wealth, I would actually have recommended I Will Teach You to Be Rich, but I'll give a different recommendation since you touched on that. In the spirit of this podcast, I'll recommend a book called The Joys of Compounding by author Gautam Bade. It's a book on personal finance and investing, plus a bunch of other stuff. It's really good. I think it's about 500 pages long, so it's a big one. But he's a hedge fund manager, a money manager from India living in the United States, and just such a brilliant human being. He's read hundreds of books on investing, and he just packs it all into that book. And a recommendation for wisdom. I am a big fan of Stoicism, of Stoic philosophy. And I've read a lot of books on Stoicism, but I think the best one to start with is called The Daily Stoic. The subtitle is something like 366 Meditations on Wisdom, Perseverance, and the Art of Living. And every day you just have to read 1 page from a Stoic philosopher like Seneca or Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus. 1 little paragraph. And then the authors, Ryan Holiday and Stephen Hanselman, they just expand for a couple of paragraphs. And it makes you think, wow, these people living thousands of years ago dealt with the same problems that we're dealing with today. And it's a very actionable philosophy. Since you've got to take action to start compounding, I think that buying and reading The Daily Stoic, this one right here, every day is a good choice.
I have that book. I mean, that's the book that got me started on stoicism, and I read one book a page for almost a year. So there is actually, it has a date, like January 1st this page and January 2nd this page. It's divided into, I believe, 3 or 4 sections, but every page has got a date that you can just, like, it takes less than 5 minutes to read, but it's so actionable. Thanks for all the book recommendations. I slipped over of one point about action. So we discussed a lot of actions today, but what would you recommend somebody gain out of this episode? What small action that they can start implementing right after listening to this episode? What would you recommend people take?
Tattoo your body with all your favorite saying. No, I'm just kidding. I would recommend reading. I would recommend replacing the last 15 minutes of your TV time every night with reading a good personal development book. Just 15 minutes, 5 days a week before you go to bed. Put away the phones, put away the TV, read something useful, prime your subconscious, and watch how fast your life changes.
That's actionable advice right there. I hope people really get this. So there's one last question. It's a rapid fire section about books. So I'll give you 2 options. So let me know which one would you choose. There are 5 questions. So just what the first thing that comes to your mind, right? So I'll start. Paperback or Kindle?
Paperback.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Nonfiction.
Audiobooks or podcasts?
Podcasts.
Okay. Self-help or biographies?
Self-help.
Last question. Time or money?
Time, for sure.
Wow, that's so good. I'm glad you gave this answer. So it's just like so good. I can totally relate to. I can almost guess what you would say based on the conversation that we had and based on what you share on Instagram. But I hope listeners find some actionable tips out of this episode. So we have a couple more minutes left. So just want to get to the last segment. So how can people learn more about you? If they really want to find or ask questions, how can people reach you?
Instagram at BookThinkers. That's the best place to go. That's where we post most of our content. We have the largest community. You can always DM me if you'd like a custom book recommendation and just tell me about a problem that you're looking to solve or a skill that you're looking to build, and I'll respond. Usually I respond to DMs once or twice a week. So I'll get in there. I'll probably ask some clarifying questions and I'll try to provide some value. And there are links in our bio on Instagram to everything else that you might need.
Well, yeah, thanks for that. I know we can talk for hours about a lot of topics, but I would love to have you on my podcast for a second time to talk more about. I want to dig deeper on your health habits, because I see your fitness habits. I see your cold plunge videos on Instagram. So I would really want to zoom in on your health habits. Maybe I would love to have you second time. I would love to catch up with you as well. We both live in Boston. I would love to catch up with you as well. With that, Nick, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll leave your audience wanting a little bit more here on the health piece. And you. I recently took a biological aging test, because there's a difference between your biological age, given major markers in all your internal organs, and your chronological age, which is what we all think about when we think of age. And so chronologically, I'm 30 years old, but biologically, the test came back as 21. So all of the health things that I've been implementing seem to be working, and I have some data to prove it. So we'll do a deeper dive on that next time.
Yes.
But Satish, great conversation today. I look forward to the next one, and we'll link up for coffee sometime soon.
Definitely. Nick, yeah, thanks for your time. Thanks for being on the show.
All right. Bye.